was a response to the 1986 Berlin discotheque bombing. This bombing left one U.S. serviceman and a Turkish woman killed and more than 200 people wounded, including 50 other U.S. servicemen.
On April 5th, in West Berlin, a terrorist bomb exploded in a nightclub frequented by American servicemen. Sergeant Kenneth Ford and a young Turkish woman were killed, and 230 others were wounded, among them some 50 American military personnel.
I do remember people walking over me, trying to get their selves out.
There was one body that flew out from the impact of the bomb.
Where we landed at, I don't know, because we were sitting, but when I got up, I was completely on the ground.
On January 20th, 1981, Ronald Reagan was elected to the office of presidency, in which he would soon carry out and enact multiple reforms and actions. Muammar Gaddafi, who had already been ruling Libya for 11 years, would soon come into conflict with the United States of America throughout the 1980s and 1990s. It all started when Reagan took interest in Libya because his advisors had warned him of the potential danger of Gaddafi's reign. This caused the United States under Reagan to take action against Gaddafi's support of terrorism against U.S. troops and citizens. For example, Gaddafi supported and financed Muslims that were anti-American and anti-British, such as the Palestinian rebels. In addition to the deteriorating relationship between the U.S. and Libya, in 1981, Libya acted with violent intent when it launched a missile at a U.S. aircraft near the Gulf of Sidra, further inflaming and declining U.S. and Libya relations. The tension between these two countries also contributed to the initiations of aerial and naval warfare, as Libya attacked U.S. Navy ships and the United States responding by destroying Libyan aircrafts and military ships, as well as bombing coastal military installations. Furthermore, in 1981, following these violent events, Reagan began to investigate Libya's true intentions under the dictatorship of Muammar Gaddafi. Reagan's administration of war found that Libya was funding acts of terror that were being plotted against U.S. personnel.
Also, Gaddafi's alignment with the Soviet Union to set up a federation in the Middle East alarmed the U.S. because of the international battle of communism, specifically the Cold War. This alignment alarmed Reagan even more, knowing the fact that Libya was working with a nuclear power, the Soviets. Libya had the means of becoming a nuclear power due to the surplus of natural resources such as petroleum, as well as the abundance of uranium present in Gaddafi's occupation of Chad. The relations between the United States and Libya hit rock bottom when Reagan imposed sanctions on Libya in January of 1986, the same year the bombing of the Berlin discotheque building took place. These sanctions, including closing Libya's embassy in Washington, an embargo on Libya's oil, and a new requirement for export licenses for most American goods. Ronald Reagan's response to these serious threats consisted of many devices. Reagan supported a wide range of covert activities targeting Libya, including disinformation campaigns, propaganda, sabotage, and support for terrorist organizations. Due to this apprehension, Reagan shaped his foreign policy in a way that boosted U.S. weaponry while disarming those affiliated with communist, nuclear powers, and or terrorist organizations. On April 5, 1986, the entertainment venue La Belle Discothèque, often visited by U.S. soldiers, was bombed by the Libyan Secret Service and embassy. The bombing left one U.S. serviceman, Sergeant Kenneth Ford, and a Turkish woman killed, and more than 200 people wounded, including 50 other U.S. servicemen. This act of terror on American personnel and American allies caused Reagan to take the initiative to proceed with direct action. Reagan's direct action called for the bombing of Libya and other terrorist affiliates on the 15th of April in 1986, where a total of 100 U.S. Air Force and Navy aircrafts successfully bombed 5 military targets, including the headquarters of Gaddafi. The attacks were mounted by 14 A-6E Navy attack jets based in the Mediterranean and 18 FB-111 bombers from bases in England, as well as numerous of other support aircrafts. 3 military barracks were hit, along with the military facilities at Tripoli's main airport and the Benina Air Base southeast of Benghazi. All targets except one were reportedly chosen because of their direct connection to terrorist activity. The Benina military airfield was hit to preempt Libyan interceptors from taking off and attacking the incoming U.S. troops. In conclusion, comprehensive sanctions were imposed in 1986, including a freeze of Libyan assets and a ban of all trade and financial dealings with the country. These sanctions were lifted in 2004 under the Bush administration.
Colonel Gaddafi is not only an enemy of the United States. His record of subversion and aggression against the neighboring states in Africa is well documented and well known. He has ordered the murder of fellow Libyans in countless countries. He has sanctioned acts of terror in Africa, Europe, and the Middle East, as well as the Western Hemisphere. Today, we have done what we had to do. If necessary, we shall do it again. It gives me no pleasure to say that, and I wish it were otherwise. Before Gaddafi seized power in 1969, the people of Libya had been friends of the United States. And I'm sure that today most Libyans are ashamed and disgusted that this man has made their country a synonym for barbarism around the world. The Libyan people are a decent people, caught in the grip of a tyrant. To our friends and allies in Europe who cooperated in today's mission, I would only say, you have the permanent gratitude of the American people. Europeans who remember history understand better than most that there is no security, no safety in the appeasement of evil. It must be the core of Western policy that there be no sanctuary for terror. And to sustain such a policy, free men and free nations must unite and work together. Sometimes it is said that by imposing sanctions against Colonel Gaddafi or by striking at his terrorist installations, we only magnify the man's importance, that the proper way to deal with him is to ignore him. I do not agree. Long before I came into this office, Colonel Gaddafi had engaged in acts of international terror, acts that put him outside the company of civilized men. For years, however, he suffered no economic or political or military sanction, and the atrocities mounted in number, as did the innocent dead and wounded. And for us to ignore, by inaction, the slaughter of American civilians and American soldiers, whether in nightclubs or airline terminals, is simply not in the American tradition. When our citizens are abused or attacked anywhere in the world on the direct orders of a hostile regime, we will respond so long as I'm in this Oval Office. Self-defense is not only our right, it is our duty. It is the purpose behind the mission undertaken tonight, a mission fully consistent with Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. We believe that this preemptive action against his terrorist installations will not only diminish Colonel Gaddafi's capacity to export terror, it will provide him with incentives and reasons to alter his criminal behavior. I have no illusion that tonight's action will ring down the curtain on Gaddafi's reign of terror. But this mission, violent though it was, can bring closer a safer and more secure world for decent men and women. We will persevere.
In Ronald Reagan's speech addressing to the nation on the United States airstrike against Libya, Colonel Gaddafi is declared an enemy of the United States of America. Reagan reasons that Gaddafi's sanctions of terror, subversion, and aggression against the neighboring states in Africa, as well as the slaughter of American civilians and American soldiers in Berlin, has ultimately and inevitably led to the direct action of self-defense consisted in Reagan's foreign policy. He states, and I quote, "When our citizens are abused or attacked anywhere in the world on the direct orders of a hostile regime, we will respond so long as I'm in this Oval Office." In addition to the attempts to relieve U.S.-Libya tensions, Reagan states that quiet diplomacy, public condemnation, economic sanctions, as well as demonstrations of military force were unsuccessful, in which contributed to Reagan's direct action in the bombing of Libya in 1986. Ever since the beginning of the deterioration of U.S.-Libya relations, which consisted of mainly the issues of nuclear power, alignment with the greatest enemy, the Soviets, as well as aerial and naval warfare, Gaddafi's planned attack against the United States in the 1986 Berlin discotheque bombing was the deciding factor and huge influence into justifying the direct action of the bombing. Reagan's view on the Libyan people are absolutely not negative, but rather due to the actions of Colonel Gaddafi, the Libyan people have become victims and should be ashamed that this man has made their country a synonym for barbarism.